Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be an amazing episode. If you want to hear a comeback story and you want to be the next comeback story, this is the episode to listen to. We're also going to teach you three things at the end of this, how to start coming back today. And also, at the end, I'm going to be offering you something that cost me $60,000 and over 11,000 hours invested for only $30. And then I'm also going to give you $1,000 worth of bonuses. So we'll talk about it at the end. So guys, this is going to be an amazing episode. Samantha Carr actually hooked us up because she is the ultimate comeback story. So let me just read a little bit of what she's done. And I love this. She was chief of staff for the FBI. She's a best-selling author, speaker, podcast host, healer. She has done it all. She is the Swiss Army knife of the comeback. So, Holly, I just want to say welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh my goodness, Richard, the comeback coach Kaufman. I love that introduction. I love the Swiss Army knife of the comeback. I love that. That is so cool. So thank you so much for having me on the show. And I really look forward to connecting with you and connecting with all your listeners.
Thank you so much. And like I said, without Samantha Carr, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much. So
she is my amazing number two. She actually worked for me at the FBI, and she reached out last summer, and everything just kind of fell into place from there. And I brought her on as my number two, and yeah, she's amazing.
Well, without a great number two, we can never be a great number one. So, and that's what my wife and my bride does. She's my number two, but she'll always be my number one. So Let me ask you first question. I mean, you've been through it all. You've been through divorce, cancer, autoimmune disease, having to pivot in your life a few times. So what is your definition of resiliency?
Oh my goodness. That is one of my favorite words. And I actually, I look at that definition from the place of fortitude. And my company is actually called Pink Fortitude. That word fortitude, and they're so similar. I'm just going to mush them together because fortitude is really my mantra. And that came from my mom. When I was little, when I was born, she was diagnosed with Addison's disease. So, and she lived to be 74 years old. She lived a wonderful life, but was always in and out of the hospital and in and out of just, having health issues. And she always said, it builds fortitude, it builds fortitude. And I always thought that it meant like, oh, you go through the tough times and it's just like staying strong. And, that's kind of what fortitude means. And after she passed away, I really leaned into that. And what I think it is the grateful heart, is the joy and the love. It is really easy to be happy and joyful and grateful when everything is good, when the times are going great. But can you be happy and joyful and grateful when the times are bad? And that's really where this fortitude and this resilience comes in. And then it's also having that agility to be able to continue that 1% every single day, even though, it's the tough times. And, and I work with, I work with a lot of women, mostly midlife, but what I share in terms of the comeback story, and, hopefully we'll get into the Rocky framework here in a little bit. What I found is that this framework is proven and tested. It doesn't matter male, female. It doesn't matter whether it's your life, your health, your career, your relationship. The framework is proven. And it's just like, it's like gravity, right? It works. And so, if you're listening and maybe not resonate to, a specific example that I'm talking about, I just want you to think about what's going on in your own life and how you can, use this, and what your big takeaway is from this interview.
I love it. So give us a quick down and dirty about who you are. Like I said, before I did about 11 or 12 hours of intensive study of you and talking to some people you even went to college with. So, give us a quick down and dirty about who Holly is, where'd you come from, where'd you grow up, and how did you become the force that you are today?
Oh my goodness. So, yeah, so Holly Bertone, I grew up in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, the small town, kind of like I say, in the middle of nowhere. And it was my dream when I was 17 years old to work for the FBI. And somehow, through a crazy series of life events, I made it there. And I lived in Alexandria, Virginia for 20 some years, worked for the FBI, worked in consulting, and then at the FBI for quite a few of them. And it was a post 9/11. And I know you talk in your story about, kind of the 9/11 and really being in that place of coming in when the FBI was doing a lot of restructuring with their national security.
Yeah.
And what happened was I was in my background and my expertise is in project management. So what I did was the skill set that I learned, I don't know, I was like 10 years old maybe. One of my favorite things to do, I would take 3 different jigsaw puzzles and I dump them out on the table, mix them up, and then put them back together. And, total nerd, nerd kid alert. But that was one of my favorite things to do. It was just like how my brain worked is I'd like to just take this big mess and then very one step at a time, very analytically, just separate out all the pieces and put it back together. And when I was at the FBI, that's exactly what I did in project management in this, kind of post 9/11, putting all the national security offices together and taking these disparate pieces of the FBI that weren't talking, that should have been together, and trying to figure out a way, okay, how do we how do we connect these offices, and how do we connect these skill sets and these people and programs and departments and everything like that, and how do we put them together to create this cohesive entity. So that's how I ended up getting promoted as a chief of staff. But then what happened soon after was everything came crashing down. And on my 39th birthday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I went through surgery and then chemo and then radiation. And what happened was that I never recovered. And I'm going to support group and there's all these women and they're, doing the 5K pink ribbon thing. And I'm like, something's wrong. I can't get out of bed. And, and the doctor's like, well, it's just going to take you some time to, get healthy. And I was like, no, a year ago, I was racing Xterra off-road triathlons. I was racing mountain bikes. I was the only civilian on the Quantico Marine Corps mountain bike team. I would stand on a podium and get a medal around my neck. And I thought that that was what healthy was. So I was like, yeah, me not getting healthier is not a good thing. So a year later, it took them a long time, but I was finally diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease, a very slow and sluggish thyroid. And that ended up turning into years of debilitating chronic fatigue, to the point where in 2017, I was actually forced to resign from my dream job at the FBI. And that was a level of rock bottom that was unlike any other. And we can get into that a little later if you want to. But it took a lot of time. And I realized, and I know you talk about this in your book, it was that personal responsibility. It was just waking up one day and saying, I'm not okay with my life like this. So I decided, I was like, and it wasn't even, I sought out to go from being bedridden to just healing myself. I was like, I just want to function. I just want to be able to enjoy my family and function. And I became a holistic health coach and kind of went down that path. And it took years, but I not just, improved my health, but got to the point where that health is very vibrant. And, using this framework that we can talk about today. And then just a year and a half ago, we went through a divorce and used this exact same framework to make the divorce literally as painless as possible and, come out on the other side so much better. And And I think the thread that kind of along the way that, kind of got me to this place of being a holistic health coach and really working with women in midlife is that we have these disparate pieces. When we're in our 20s and 30s, we're told to chase the dream. We've got this career, we're supposed to get the spouse, we're supposed to have the kids, and we're supposed to do all of these things. And then we chase after them. And we get some or all of them. And now our entire lives are devoted to those things. We give our all, like at our work, like that's our identity is our career. We give our all to our spouse. We give our all to our kids, but we don't give anything to ourselves. And the common thread here, like I did when I was 10 years old with the puzzles, like I did at the FBI, is take all of these disparate pieces in someone's life and saying, how do I come back home to myself?
Okay, so let's get into this because they call me the GI Joe Rogan and the male Oprah. So we're gonna go
I
there.
love it. The Mofra, the male Oprah.
So okay, let's talk about. And I write things down because I do have a traumatic brain injury, and I want to make sure I don't miss any of the points. So if I'm writing something down, I'm not ignoring you. I want to talk about certain things.
Oh, I was gonna say we are kindred spirits because cancer did a number on my brain cells, so we're good.
So let's talk about mom a little bit because I think that she played a big part of you overcoming. Because a lot of times, if we have that one person in our life, even if they're not here anymore, they still circulate in our brain, and you can still hear their voices. And that was my uncle Bob. He actually, he's the one, and my uncle Tino. They're constantly in my head, being like, "Okay, you can get through this. You can come back. You're the comeback coach." So, talk about that voice, your mom's voice that you still hear in your head.
Yeah, I mean, really, it just goes back to her words of, it builds fortitude. And just she didn't have a mean bone in her body. She didn't have an angry bone in her body. She just had so much love and joy for every single person in every single moment. And I try to carry that with me. And I remember one of her favorite sayings when I was growing up, and we'd be outside, and she'd look up at the sky, and it usually like a day where there weren't a lot of clouds and just this blue sky, and she's like, "Oh, I wonder what the poor people were doing. It's $1 million day." And I mean, I grew up in the 70s. No one was no one was well off in the 70s. And it really helped me to realize, like, it's that true wealth is that $1 million day is having that love and that inner peace in your heart. And I realized when I hit rock bottom with my health is that, when you don't have your health, you don't have much. I mean, it's really hard to function when you don't have anything. And my identity was based, in my career and being I was the chief of staff at the FBI. Like, that's kind of cool. That took a lot of hard work to get there, and it was gone. And that piece of me being a successful career woman was so ingrained in my identity, and that was gone. And then barely being able to function as a wife, as a stepmother, that was gone. And it really took that level of rock bottom to understand what this $1 million day really is. And it's having that love and that inner peace in your heart that everything can be taken away from you, but you can still come back home to that.
And okay, so and I love that, and I love something that you talked about. I'm a gratitude guy. I'm big on gratitude before I go to bed every night. And this is a hack my followers know that every night before I go to bed, I put my arm around my wife. I pray for her happiness, her health. I pray that she knows I love her forever. And then I pray for my dog that's laying next to me. But then I think of three things that I'm grateful for that happened during the day. And this interview is going to be one of them tonight. And then when I wake up in the morning, I wake up and if I could see something because I lost 80% of my vision at one time, I literally sit up in bed and say, Lord, thank you. Whatever challenges you're going to send my way, I accept them. And whatever wins I'm going to have today, I accept them. So before my feet even hit the floor, I'm in a gratitude state already. So talk about, sometimes when you're going through struggles, we're not grateful for what we already have. Like, for me, even when I was going through my struggles, I have a list that I keep in my wallet. It's what I call my gratitude list. So even if I'm down, I'm like, okay, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for this. And it kind of puts you in a different mood. And sometimes you don't want to be grateful, but sometimes, like my dad came from Italy on the boat, and he said, the man with no shoes can't complain to the man with no feet.
Hmm.
So for me, I try to be grateful for everything I have. So talk about gratitude.
Yeah, it is such an important part of my life. And, really, it's like I said, it's hard. It's easy to be grateful. It's easy to be grateful when everything is good. And it's easy to kind of forget your gratitudes when everything is good because it's just life is good and you're just enjoying it. But it's sometimes it's hard to be that intentional. But then when things go bad, when things don't go your way, then you're like, oh, well, kind of you're like, oh, well, at least, I'm grateful about this or whatever. But it's really those times of using gratitude as a place of it's kind of like ninja gratitude. Using gratitude as a place of everything happens for me. And the bad times, the adversities, the doors that close is, you can look at it as God protecting you or the universe protecting you or, whatever your religion, faith, or spirituality, practice is, that higher power is protecting you. And that door is closing, and so often the door closes and we're there in our temper tantrum. Well, I want the door open. How can I get the door open? And we're pounding on the door. Why me? Why me? Why me? When we fail to look over and there's another better door that's open. We just refuse to see it. And then when we see it, we're like, well, I don't want to go in that door. I like this other door. And that's what gratitude is being able to be okay. Not just to be okay, but to be thankful that those doors are closing, that those doors have closed, that there's something better. And the it's it's the contrast that creates the clarity. And I think, and I know you've been through your share of adversities, is when you hit these lows, you can get to this place where when you come up out of it, when you're on the other side, you're like, oh yeah, this is why. And I remember the day that I realized that I had to resign from my dream job at the FBI. I mean, I remember sitting in, it was, I don't know if guys do this, but like those like hysterical, ugly tears that just like every single fiber in your body, it's just like you're just heaving,
Yeah.
crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that in the office. So I went down into the stairwell and I just sat there. And one of the girls from my office, she just came, she didn't say a word. She just had her hand on my back. And I just cried it out. And I mean, I don't think at that time, there was no way I could see how bright, what are we at now? 7 years later, how bright the light is on the other side.
And how, Holly, I totally agree. And one of my favorite songs is by Garth Brooks. It's "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers."
Mm,
Sometimes God says the answer is no, and we try to be in our will instead of His. But
yeah.
something I want to talk about is that you mentioned my friend James Clear wrote an amazing book called Atomic Habits, and now he actually has a new app out. So if you guys get a chance, check out James Clear app. But he talks about getting just 1% better.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, especially around New Year's, we're all New Year, new me bullshit. They try to go 100 degrees in one day instead of doing the 1% a day. like when I lost my vision, I was supposed to fly down with Ed Milet to one of his events on his jet, and I lost my vision. And I couldn't fly, and we talked, and he said, "Rich, nothing happens to you; everything happens for you, and everything is a teachable moment. And God doesn't waste a hurt. You just watch and see what happens in the future." So I love what you talk about is, sometimes we don't see it, but we turn our pain into purpose. So talk about, getting just 1% better. Because a lot of people think, well, what's 1%? Well, if you go on a plane and you're going 1 degree off track, you're not going to get where you're going. So talk about that 1%.
Can we go backwards a little bit first?
You're my guest, and this is your house for now.
And by the way, I was gonna say James Clear and Ed Milet, like two of my favorites. So that's awesome. I think this is a really big mistake that a lot of people make is when they think about this goal, whatever that is. The majority of the women I work with, it's health. I want to lose weight or get my energy back or sleep better, all those things. But whatever that goal is, we want to go. We just want to go. We want to go and do the thing. Just tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to go do it. And especially working with, professionals and overachievers and, type A personality, it's like, okay, just tell me what to do and I'm going to go do it. But what happens is that we see success in different aspects of our life, but not in others. Right. So for an example, the majority of the women I work with, they see success in their career, or, they have amazing families, but they let their health go. And it's like, just tell me what to do and I'm going to go do it. Well, that's where the 1% comes in. But what happens is that in my belief and the framework that I teach is that there's two things that need to happen first. Because what happens is we get to that place where we do the thing, but then the obstacles happen and our brain wants to go right back to homeostasis. And our brain is like, nope. We're just going to go back to the way we used to do it because that's better. So what I like to do is actually start backwards before we start forwards. This is the Rocky framework that I teach. And R is the rear view mirror. And that is getting right with your past. That is peace and forgiveness. That's hard. We go right for the jugular, which everyone's like, Holly, you are crazy to be able to coach and go right for the jugular like that, because forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness is a really hard thing to do. But I'm like, you know what? It's a slower process, but it's sustainable. Like if you want to keep spinning your wheels and doing the same thing over and over again and not getting results, go right ahead. If you want sustainability,
what is that the definition of?
Insanity.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and when I say forgiveness, I'm not talking blame. I'm not talking shame. I'm not saying if there's another person involved, I'm not saying what they did was okay if it wasn't. I'm not saying that they are to be left off the hook or anything like that. Forgiveness is about breaking the tether with those people who you potentially blame for getting you to this point, breaking the tether with that blame of yourself for getting you to this point. That's where we got to start. That's why we got to go backwards. And this is the stuff that no one's talking about. Is that forgiveness, that inner peace? Because when you get that inner peace, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll. Because when you start to go, if you start at go, right? And then you get these limiting beliefs and these thoughts in your head, and it's all stemmed from these unhealed wounds and the triggers, right? And it all goes back to those unhealed wounds. And you're like, oh, I'm just going to go back and do my own thing, right? But when you heal that past, when you make right with your past, you go to that rear view mirror, you have that peace and forgiveness, you're clean. You are starting at a clean slate. And the other thing too is, and I know you're really big into personal development, is we create our future from where we're currently at, right? So our future is created.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Our future is created twice. You can go, I think it's Einstein and Stephen Covey, and I'm sure
Yep.
more. But our future is created once in our thoughts and then in reality.
Yep.
And when we create our future from that place of where we're currently at, if we are currently in anger, anxiety, demise, bitterness, resentment, frustration, like when we've got all of these colorful emotions and we're trying to create our future self from that place, our future self is going to look like a lot of what we're currently at. But when we can go back to that rear view mirror and find peace and forgiveness and break that tether, you're starting from a much cleaner, pure place to create your future self. And then the second piece of this is the O, and it's own your ship with a P, like a boat. You can call it something else if you want. I like to keep it G-rated, but that's personal responsibility. That is the ability to respond. That is one of the hardest things that I ever did. And that is, and multiple times in my life, when things aren't going my way, I love to have, our brains are like 3-year-olds throwing temper tantrums on a daily basis. That's just how our brains work. And it's the ability to look at that toddler in your brain and say, I'm taking responsibility for this. And it calms that temper tantrum down. But it is one of the hardest things to do, is to look in the mirror and to say, I have agency over my life. You've already done the forgiveness. So we're not looking at it from a place of I'm blaming myself or I'm shaming or I'm, blaming anything that I did in the past to get me here. It's from this second forward, I'm good. I have agency and I am taking full responsibility for every single action, thought, behavior, everything that I do. And when R and O, rear view mirror, own your ship with a P like a boat, when those two are nailed down, that's when you're unstoppable. And that's what I think the majority of the people miss, is because we all want to go. We all want the quick fix. But you got to get right with your past and you got to get right with yourself.
And I love that. And I'm writing all this stuff down, so I really want to talk about this. So the first thing I wrote down, Holly, was slow is fast when you focus. Follow one course until successful. Like for
Slow
me,
is smooth, smooth is fast.
and I have ADD, so my mind is like a hamster on a wheel going, yeah. But I realize that once I slow down, I don't make the mistakes that I would. That's going to cost me more time if I just slow down and took the right course of action. So I love that what you talk about. Now, I also teach a course on the forgiveness. It's called the 3 Pillars of Forgiveness. Now, I'm in recovery, 35 years, clean and sober, and I realized, number one, I had to ask for forgiveness all the people I've hurt, because people don't realize that whoever's watching this, that you are the demon in somebody else's story.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness for people you've hurt, because hurt people hurt people. Then also, I had to forgive people that hurt me, because I know even the Bible says that you will be forgiven if you forgive. Not forget, but forgive. And number 3 is, if you don't forgive yourself, you're not going to be able to run on the treadmill if your rucksack just keeps getting filled with more shit. And then the last thing I want to talk about, then I'm going to let you roll out. Once I had a conversation with Tony Robbins, and I started getting into the whole personal development. So I went to Think and Grow Rich, read that, studied that, and then I figured, well, who did he learn from? And he learned from the Carnegie brothers. And something they talked about, now we call it the RAS system, the reticular activating system. But the saying that I got from them was, your obsessions become your possessions. And your mind is like your Facebook feed. Whatever you like in heart is what you're going to see, positive or negative. So break that down for us, about how what we look for, we're going to find. So talk about that.
Yeah, that is so true. I'm all about the reticular activating system, and and that is creating that future self, and creating that future self from that place of really that place of purity, and getting rid of those negative tethers. But you brought up a good point when especially when you're just kind of mentioned about the monkey mind and everything, is that when we're in this state of stress or burnout, and I'm not talking catastrophic events. I'm not talking, some kind of, crazy adversity. I'm just talking about life, everyday life. I mean, yesterday I was on my way to a ribbon cutting that was for me. Like I was the host of the party at the Chamber of Commerce, and the garage door got stuck on the trunklet. I almost didn't make it to my own party. Right. And then I get there and I was behind a car that was driving really slow, and I could just feel the stress coming up. And I recognized it right away, and I just started laughing. I was like, well, this is going to make a great story because it's not always about the big stuff. Like some of us, like you and me and some other people listening, have really big stuff. Most people, like, they have a few big things here and there, but most of it is just everyday life. It's just the everyday life that just piles on top of each other. And what happens is that when we're in that state of stress, we've got the 90-second lesson here, the autonomic nervous system divided between your sympathetic stress state and your parasympathetic peace state. So when we're in that state of stress, our body does all of the things like we're running from the saber-toothed tiger. We're not running from the saber-toothed tiger. We're late for a meeting. We got an argument with our spouse. We're, behind on a report. Like most of it, again, I'm not discounting the big stuff, but I'm saying the majority of the time, it's not big stuff. It's just life that just compounds on each other. But when we're in that state, our brain wants to only focus on running, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses, right? So your brain isn't like, oh, gee, maybe, so the saber-tooth tiger is chasing, your brain's not like, oh, you know what? The garage needs to be cleaned. Maybe I'll clean the garage instead of running. You know what? I need a new pair of running shoes. Maybe I should just go buy a new pair of running shoes at the mall this weekend. Maybe I should just start running on Monday. No, our brain is like run, run, run. And that's all that it focuses on. But when we're in that parasympathetic peace state, our brain has the space to not live in the problem, but to live in the solution. And our brain has that space to let those solutions come in. And the more space and the more peace that we have in our brain, the better those solutions are and the more creative they are. But what we do is we live in this world where, if you're home and you're, married and kids, and your home it has this cacophony of love, which is amazing, right? But it's still kind of loud. And then you go to work and it's loud. And then, we go on social media, we go on the negative news, and we've got all of this stuff coming in our heads. And let me ask you this, you're listening. I want you to be honest with yourself. At night, at the end of the day, sit down, turn on, I don't know, Netflix, Hulu, whatever TV you watch. You turn on that TV. Within 60 seconds, do you grab your phone and start scrolling on social media? The answer is probably 90% of you are saying yes at this point, if you're being honest with yourself.
Nope, I know, because what I do is every night at 6 p.m., my phone goes in the other room and I don't answer it. I mean, if somebody needs me, they can call my wife because she's always got her phone. But I want to make sure that I'm present. I work 12 hours a day, but I want to make sure I'm present with my family for the other 12. So I'm part of the 10% that just like, all right, I'm a social media producer. I'm not a consumer. So I'm just putting the shit away and it'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like we have all of this noise and we don't give ourselves that space to think. You're talking back to that 1%. That's where the 1% comes from, is from that space. And we get those answers in that space. We get the answers in the quiet. But it's so much easier. Our brain has homeostasis with all of this noise because that's what it's used to and it's safe. Right? And back to the reticular activating system. When we are seeking that space, those are the answers. You talked about God. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, about this. Like, so often we think of prayer, and we think of prayer as this like push, right? We're praying to God. We're like pushing this stuff that we want to God. But how often do we actually listen? Right? They tell the story about the flood and the guy that dies,
Yeah.
and and he's like, God, dude, where were you? And God's like, I gave you a radio, I gave you a rowboat, I gave you a helicopter, you know, and we don't have that quiet and that space to listen for those answers. And those answers, it's not like they're always going to come in some great big epiphany. Sometimes it's just, I'm turning on a podcast episode, one of yours, or, a podcast episode. And the answer that I'm looking for is in that episode that I turn on. Like, that's just how it works. Like, when we're in that space, our reticular activating system is looking for that answer.
Yeah.
But so often we dismiss it, and we don't know that those are the answers. We expect it to be something big. I'll give you another example. I was seeking some clarification on something in my life, and I spent a solid hour in meditation and in silence. And I came out, and it was like a Saturday afternoon, and I was like, okay, work's done, house is clean, meditation. I was like, yeah, let me go turn on TV. So, and I've been watching old school, like 1970s Charlie's Angels, shows. I kid you not. I turn on the show and I'm watching the show. Literally, the answer that I need is in that Charlie's Angels show. Had I watched the show a few days earlier, it would not have had that meaning. But because I was very specific, very intentional coming out of that meditation, I turn on that show. I'm like, there it is, right in front of me. But we don't quiet ourselves to find these answers.
And and I'm actually writing an article tomorrow on LinkedIn about how active listening can change your life, your relationships, and your business. And that's part of it. Is just sometimes it's just listening to the still quiet voice, and sometimes it says nothing, but sometimes that's okay. Now, I think your whole Rocky framework for me. Like I said, I did a lot of studying. I've watched everything you've done, listened almost every podcast you've ever done. So if your numbers have gone up, I take responsibility. And I try not to curse on the show, but it's my show, so I can do what I want. I think the O is the biggest part of the whole Rocky thing, because you have to own your shit. And I wasn't a big Grant Cardone guy until I read his book and I heard his story. But the one thing I got out of the whole book was, from that moment on, since I read it on the page, and once I realized that I own everything that ever happened, I own everything that's going to happen to me in the future. I can't prevent things that are going to happen to me, but I'm also in charge of how I react. So, talk about, like I said, I love it, is to own your stuff, because once you become self-aware, and self-awareness is a bitch, because sometimes I'll have an argument with my wife, and then I'll come down here and think, and I'm like, I really screwed up this time. So I go up and say, listen, honey, I'm sorry, I was in the wrong. But because I'm starting to be self-aware of all my relationships and anything that I do, I have to be self-aware. So talk about that self-awareness and ownership coming together.
Yeah, and I really see this as the difference between information and implementation, and the cost of inaction. So the 3 I's. So many of us, and I love how the examples that you've given, you've taken the information that you've received and you've implemented it, right? And so many of us, we get addicted to the personal development. And it's like, I just want to listen and learn and grow and all the thing, and listen to the podcasts and the books and go to the seminars. But are you just getting the information, or are you actually doing something with it? And that's kind of a hard one there too, because so many people, they're like, I love this stuff, but then really, are you implementing this in your life? So I think that's one of the big differences. And then it's also the cost of inaction. So if you aren't implementing this in your life, what is that cost of inaction? What does that look like? I can't tell you how many people in my community who, like, oh, I've, listened to all the podcasts and done all this stuff. And, and they're in the same place that they were a
Yeah.
year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, potentially even worse. And, it's like, I'm all about the tough love, but I lead with love, right? Like, I know that we're doing the best that we can with what we have, but at some time you got to do something. You got to actually do something. And that's where the implementation comes in. And actually we go back to Rocky. Everything goes back to Rocky, right? The C is ROC. The C is create your future self. And that's the actual doing is getting off the tuchus and doing something about it. Is that 1% we talked about with James Clear, that 1% every single day. And this can be fun. Like, this is where, the goal setting and the visualization and the manifesting and the affirmations. And, so many people are like, oh, I said my affirmations, but they don't work. Well, our brain believes what we want it to believe. So many of us were like, okay, let's say, I don't know, our business is at $50,000, right? And you're telling yourself, my business is a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. Well, your business is 50,000. Your brain hasn't made that gap yet, right? So we got to tell our brain what it believes. And that's where we think about these, like the manifestations and the affirmations. Like, no, you got to make it safe in your body for your brain to think that it can do these things, right? Like we got to have that safety in ourselves to be like, okay, I'm actually safe to think that I can do this. Because we've got, what's the set point, right? Like, we're always going to be here until we are. My coach actually talks about the box, right? The thing that you want, like, you've got you're in this box, but the thing that you want is outside of the box. And what we do is, like, we just keep moving and we just keep chasing the box, right? But when we expand ourselves, go back to the quiet, back to the meditation, back to having that quiet and that space to find those answers, when we expand ourselves, that thing that we want is now in that field. And back to the reticular activating system, right? This is now what we can do, what we can manifest, what we can believe. And that is really what the doing is about. It's not just, tell me what to do and I'm going to go do it. Just tell me the plan. Just give me the diet. Just tell me the thing. It's being able to see bigger than yourself, to believe bigger than yourself, to implement it, and to realize if I don't implement it, there's going to be a cost to it.
And Holly, I love that. And now I'm listening. I just finished Patrick Bet-David's audio book, Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And now I'm listening to The Wolf of Wall Street on my Audible book as I do my cardio. But something that anybody that's successful, they talk about is you have to not only set goals, but there has to be an emotion to that goal. Like, I had one of my clients, last year, he's like, I want to buy a Lambo. I want to buy a Lambo. And he has the money. So I picked him up one day and he said, where we're going? I'm like, we're going to go to the Lamborghini dealer. He's like, what? I'm like, we're going to go to the dealer. You're going to get in it. You're going to smell the leather. You're going to touch it. You're going to go for a test drive. And you're going to get emotionally involved. So he did that. And he got home. He's like, bro, I can smell the leather. He's like, I can hear the hum of the engines. And he bought it within 6 months. But he had to become emotionally involved in that thing. Like, we're going on a cruise this year, and I'm looking at a beach house that I want. I'm looking at a boat that I want. So I'm going to go on the boat. I'm going to take it for a ride. I'm going to go to a beach house exactly like the one I want. I'm going to walk around it. I'm going to smell it. I'm going to smell the fresh air. I'm going to get emotionally involved. So when I put it on my vision board, it's emotional now. So talk about that, is putting emotion behind the work. Because if you're just imagining something and there's no emotion, you're really not going to hit your goals when things get tough.
One thing that I love to do is kind of a hack is, I don't know if you've ever heard of Nix Play. It's like the electronic photo frames.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's
Yep.
different brands. My brand is Nixplay, but it's like an electronic photo frame. So basically what I did was I put photos from my past, and then I put photos of things from my future. And sometimes I even Photoshop myself in those photos, right? And so for example, the home screen on my phone is me photoshopped on a TED stage. I haven't applied. I'm still, yeah.
I have
I'm
my,
still,
I have my beach house and I got my boat right on my home screen. So I get that.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's on my list. I need to do the thing. I can't just dream about it. I actually have to apply and get accepted and do the thing to get there. But like I see it every single day. But what I did with this photo frame was I took past memories with future memories that I haven't experienced yet. And what happened, I even had friends send me pictures of places that they've been or stuff that they've done, right? That didn't have them in them. They were just, and I put them in, and one looked, and I remember I had never been to Sedona before. And one of the photos looked exactly like Garden of the Gods, which I had been to before in Colorado. And every time I looked at that picture, I was like, oh, that was such a fun trip, because the two looked so close to each other. And when I got to Sedona and I saw that rock, I was like, this is weird, because I've been here before, because my brain thought of that future memory as something that I already did. So when I got there, it was already like, well, I've already been here before.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about manifestation, because my cousin went to Atlantis like 30 years ago and took pictures. And I was like, oh my God, I got to go there. So I put it on my vision board, because I have a vision board that I have. And my wife calls me up and says, we're going on a cruise. I'm like, all right, where we're going? She's like, we're going to the Bahamas. And I'm like, wait, you're afraid of boats. She's like, yeah, but I know this is something you've always wanted to do. We're going to visit Atlantis, but our next true vacation, we're going to spend a week at Atlantis. But I think if it wasn't on my vision board, if I wasn't constantly thinking about it, it wouldn't be able to manifest in my life today. So talk about manifesting. It's not woo woo. It's actually science. But a
Yeah,
lot of people think it's woo woo, and it's not. It's
it's
actual
not
science.
woo woo. It's science. Yeah. And so I have two examples. One is really small and one is really big, because I really want to show kind of the difference between the two, in terms of like, it doesn't have to be like it's the same thing, right? So it doesn't matter if it's big or small, it works. So I'll give you the small one first. And that was, I had a picture from a farmer's market up, and I don't even know why I had it up on my an actual physical bulletin board, vision board. And I don't even know, it was a picture that I took at my farmer's market, but it had a lot of beets on it. And I didn't think anything of it. I just put it up there, and I don't even know why I did. But fast forward, one day I'm cutting up beets in the kitchen, and I'm like, I've been eating beets for the last few weeks, and I don't even know why. I don't even like beets, but I've been really, I mean, I used to hate beets. And I was like, I've been really like eating them a lot lately. This is kind of weird. Huh. And I didn't think anything of it. And then later on, I'm in my office and I just glanced up at the vision board and I saw that photo. And again, I don't even know why I even put it up there. And it was all the beets. And I was like, oh, that's kind of okay. This stuff actually works. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't even like it was I'm trying to manifest eating beets, right? It was just something that I saw every day that I totally forgot about. I just saw without seeing. The next thing I know, I'm eating beets, and I don't even know why. So that's the small example. The big example, this is my favorite. When my ex and I were first married, we wanted to buy our, forever home, family home, whatever. And he was deployed. He was a Green Beret. He was overseas in Afghanistan. And so I was in charge of finding the house. So I found our perfect house, like literally our perfect house. It was 5 blocks away from his son. So we were in walking distance. It was a block away from the school. It was in the best neighborhood. It was perfect. But it was $100,000 over our max budget. And I went to every single open house. My realtor took me inside of the house every other week. So if they weren't having an open house, I would like physically go inside and walk around. Every single night when I went to bed, I closed the house down. So I'm laying in bed, falling asleep, and I literally I locked the front door. I went into the kitchen, I locked the back door, I checked the stove, I walk up the stairs, I turn the lights out, I go into the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I turn the lights out, I get into my side of the bed, and I literally do my entire bedtime, like shutting down the house routine in my head in this house. Several months later, we got the house $100,000 under asking. We got it at our top budget.
And okay, so let's talk about that, Holly. Because like every morning I do the dishes while my wife's working because she works from home. So I do the dishes and I wipe down the kitchen. And as I'm wiping down our marble kitchen, I'm like, Lord, thank you. Thank you for the beautiful home we have. Thank you for the beach house that's coming. Thank you for, I have my Kia. I love my Kia, but thank you for the truck and the boat that's coming. But I'm grateful for what I have. And I think a lot of people, we want so much, but we're not grateful for what we have. And I believe God, the universe, is kind of like a father. For me, if my kids, I got 3 beautiful children, I'm so blessed. But if, every time if I give them something and they're like, or they don't appreciate what I'm giving them, I'm not going to give them more. And I believe that, if you appreciate what you have, you're going to get more. And I believe that there's a saying that I haven't written down is whatever you appreciate, appreciates.
Yes.
So
100%.
talk about that a little bit and talk about, besides just manifesting what you want, being grateful for what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said the words that I would have. That's exactly how I phrase it. Is it's being grateful for the small things that opens up the door to being grateful to big things. I use it like the favorite aunt, and has the 2 nieces. And the one niece is a spoiled brat, and oh, I don't like this, and the other niece is so oh, here's a penny, and they're so grateful. Well, guess what? Yeah, aunts can play favorites, right? Guess which kid is going to get the presents. And and that's really, it's just to appreciate what you have doesn't mean that you can't appreciate what you don't have yet. It just means that it's going to continue to grow. I actually interviewed Ken Honda on my podcast, Your Comeback Story, and he talked a lot about happy money. And I love this concept of looking at money from a place of not just currency and not just energy and not just flow, but the ripple effect. So when you're at the store and you're paying for your groceries,
Yeah.
it's not just, thank you that I have the money to buy groceries to feed my family. It's saying thank you to the people that work at the grocery store. It's saying thank you to the farmers who were able to, produce all of your, organic produce. And it's looking at it from that ripple effect of, not just what can my money do for me and what I have, what can it do for me, but how is it impacting others' lives too?
And I went food shopping yesterday, and as I'm walking through the parking lot, people must think I've lost my mind because I didn't have earbuds in or anything. So I'm just saying, Lord, thank you. Thank you for the money to buy food, because 3 miles away from my home right now is where I lived in a crack house. I was eating dog food and eating food out of the garbage. So for me, I'm just like, Lord, thank you. And I believe he's saying, okay, son, I know you're grateful. So whatever you need, I got you. So, okay. So now I'm writing this down and I wanted to make sure. So we got rear view, we got own your ship, and then creating your future. So what is the K?
The K is keep the vision, not the view. And this is, I think, what gets most people tripped up when they try to do something without the framework, because it's going to, like, life is going to, my podcast producer actually says life gets lifey. And you start the thing, you have that initial excitement, but then it's a rainy day, or you didn't get a good night's sleep, or I don't know, your spouse works late, or you work late, or whatever. There's life is always going to bring an obstacle, if you choose to see it that way, almost every single day. It may not be big, it's usually something small, but it's the small things that are enough to knock us off our game. And we let those small things knock us off our game. So when I say, when you go through that framework and you get to this place where you're like, okay, keep the vision, not the view. I've got that vision, and I am not going to let the small stuff knock me off my game. Oh, it's raining outside, and I can't go outside to walk, or I don't choose to walk outside in the rain. Oh, well, guess what? I'm going to put my sneakers on and I'm just going to walk around the house, maybe call a friend and walk and talk. Oh, well, my house is only 1,000 square feet. Well, you can still walk around 1,000 square feet. You can still get a lot of steps. Go call a friend, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, right? And it's not letting the excuses get in the way. It's not letting the obstacles get in the way. It's basically training your brain, back to every single thing that we've already talked about, training your brain to be in that space of, I'm still going to do the thing. And I think so often, and again, my lens is from, a health perspective. So many people think, oh, it's a diet. Diet is eating, salads and rabbit food. And I hate rabbit food. And I'm hungry after I eat rabbit food. Well, first of all, diets and health is not rabbit food, right? It's a whole bigger picture than that. But, if you view the thing as something that you hate to do, guess what? You're not going to do it. But if it's something that's just a part of you, it's just like brushing your teeth. Like, whether you like to brush your teeth or don't, like, pretty much it's neutral. It's just a thing you do every day, right? So when you look at that thing that you want to do to get to the result, and you keep your vision, not the view, you're able to do the thing regardless of the circumstances.
And Holly, something that I read, Awaken the Giant Within, 25 years ago when it first came out. But when I started getting back into personal development, I listened to it again on audio. So I'm a big audio book guy. I love audio, and that's when I do my cardio. I listen to my audio. But something that Tony said, and then when I talked to him again, something that he said was that when you change your have tos to get tos, your whole perspective changes. And it happened to me, and I talk about this all the time. I think it was last winter. It was cold out. It was raining, sleet, and I got to take the garbage out to the street. And I kicked the garbage can because I'm cold and I'm pissed. As I get there, I turn around and I look at my house, and I'm like, wait a minute. 3 miles away from here, you were living in your car or living in a crack house. Now you get to take the garbage out of your own house. And that's when my whole mindset switched to everything that I have to do. I automatically think I get to do, because all the people that died today had plans yesterday.
Right.
So even if, whatever it is, I get to do that thing that some people don't get to do. So talk about switching that mindset from the have to get to.
And I'm going to bring the divorce into this. And I think divorce is something that a lot of people can relate to. Either they've been through one or they know someone who's been through one. And, I think so often, you watch people go through a divorce, and there's a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of revenge. So often it's like, I gave him the best, years of my life, or, I gave it my all, or, all of this stuff. And it becomes this petty separation, right? Like, you're squabbling over, dollars and days and all of this, crazy stuff. And when I was able to use this framework with my divorce, I showed up in a very different space. And the way that I showed up influenced the way that my ex-husband showed up, which basically we were able to knock out our separation agreement in 7 days I don't even think we argued. And it was just, it was a divorce. It was painful. There was, grief and tears and all of the thing. But when you get to that space of, you're talking about the get to versus I get to, or I want to versus I have to. And the have tos creates these spaces of when something happens, it is long to go through it and it's deep to go through it. But when you can look at it from this place of I get to, that length shortens, right? It's not taking away the pain of what you're doing, but it shortens it. It's not taking away the pain that you're going through, but it doesn't affect you, on a scale of 1 to 10, when it's normally a 12, well, now maybe it's a 6. So this is what this means, is how we show up can really change that perspective. And again, like going through this divorce, I mean, I proved to myself, like I already did the framework on myself, working with my students and my clients. And I was like, you know what, let me just try this out on my divorce. And I was like, hey, it works.
Okay. So, and you've read my book. I've had 2 practice marriages now. I'm married to my bride and my best friend and my soulmate. And I write in the book and that I've never had a bad woman in my life. It's always been my fault. And it all goes back to to realizing, okay, I understand what parts I've played. And I think once like you said, once we get to that point of realizing, all right, you've been divorced, what part did you play?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do so it doesn't happen again? And I think that's owning your ship. That's where that comes from. So,
and that was Richard, that was brutal. Like I have already done the responsibility thing over and over and over again. But when I was looking at the divorce, it's so easy to say, oh, well, I was the perfect one in the marriage. It was, all of them. But I looked in the mirror and it was brutal. I was like, okay, how did I help us get to this place? And I was like, oh man, do we have to do this? Yeah. If you want to come out on the other side and be in that place of healed and not have those open wounds, yeah, you got to go there.
All right. So let's go to the why of the Rocky story. And I'm a big Rocky guy. I love Rocky. I watch every one of them. And I actually like Rocky 4 is my favorite, but don't tell anybody.
So, the original Rocky movie, circa, was it 1976? He lost the fight to Apollo Creed. Yep. And, everyone always thinks, oh, Rocky won. No, Rocky lost the fight because it's the journey. Why is coming back home to you? And, you can go back to The Wizard of Oz. You can go back to any 80s movie, montage. You can go back to Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, right? We have this inside of us the whole time, right? We're searching and searching and searching for answers, looking at everyone else. Tell me what to do. When we have those answers inside. And that why is simply the explanation point on this whole thing, is coming back home to you, realizing you have the answers inside. And that shows up from that place of authenticity, from that place of value and purpose and sparkle and confidence and being able to use your voice and showing up in a place of not getting triggered, having that regulated nervous system, just knowing, like that you said about the gratitude, like just knowing that everything is going to be okay. I have no worries in the world because I am supported. And that is really what that why is all about, is going through this whole journey and realizing that you really do have the answers all along and coming back home to you.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because for me, my whole life has come full circle now. When I first started podcasting, I wanted to be the next Gary Vee. I wanted to be the next Ed Milet, Patrick Bet David. But I realized the best version of me is me.
The first Richard, the comeback coach, Kaufman.
And, and I know that I'll cry at the drop of a hat, that I'm loving, I'm caring, I'm me. For if I was going to be a superhero, I would be empathy man, because I have a lot of empathy for people. But that's who I am. And it wasn't until recently till I realized that's what people like about you, because that's who you are. So, even like Gary Vaynerchuk says, and I thank Gary because Gary started this whole thing from a lunch that we had together. And he said, own your shit. But he also said, triple down on what you're great at and don't really worry about what you're not good at. And you, like you said, oh, you are you. There's only one you. So be the best you that you can be, right?
Yep. Yep. And it's really that zone of genius, is really finding where, and I look in the health space, especially the holistic health space. There's a lot of haters out there. There's a lot of cancel culture out there. There's a lot of I'm right, you're wrong. There's a lot of, just people going at each other. And it's brutal. And it took me a while to get to this place where I'm like, I'm okay to speak my truth. My truth might be different than your truth, but I'm okay to speak my truth. And it doesn't matter what you say about my truth is still my truth. And I think to be in, the personal development space, to be in the health space, you've got to have some solid foundation. And that's really what that why is all about, is to be in that space where you can speak your truth with confidence. And it doesn't matter what anyone else says about your truth, that your truth is your truth.
I love it, Holly. And one thing I forgot to mention, I didn't put it in the beginning, but I won Soldier of the Year when I was in the military. And in 2014, you won Woman of the Year. So I just wanted to say, I wanted to give you a big shout out because that was something that I resonated with. And I just wanted to give you, big accolades for,
thank you.
When you win something of the year, that means you're doing the work, you're putting in the work, but you're also affecting lives. I wanted to give that, and I forgot. I wrote it down. I just forgot to put it in.
That's okay. Thank you. I almost forgot about it.
So last question is, if somebody is looking to, like you said, was it 2017? You were no longer an FBI. And a lot of us, when we get out of the military, we have a shelf life. And sometimes, eventually, we got to hang up that uniform. And we're no longer that thing or that title. So what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for somebody that's looking to reimagine and reinvent their life?
Wow. You mean in addition to everything we just talked about in the last hour?
something that they could just take a quick, actionable steps in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours.
Oh my goodness. I really feel like, and I don't know if it's a 72-hour thing, but I'm just going to focus on one, is we really look at our lives from an internal versus external validation. And we look at all of these pieces of our lives to validate who we are. But when you can, break that tether of being attached to this external thing to validate you, right? You're a good husband, not because your wife says you're a good husband, but because you're a good husband, right? Like your identity is from inside. It's who you are as a person. It's who you are as a child of God. It's the values that you believe in. And that's what makes you you. And that's where that validation comes from. That you don't have to look to something else to feel valued, to feel respected, to feel heard. That it's all from within. And when you can find that place from within, you're unstoppable.
So, okay, last question is, obviously, and I texted you, I messaged you, I'm like, I'm stalking you, joking. But, I follow you on all your socials. So how do we find you? How do we get in touch with you? How, if we want to get this Rocky framework, how do we go about getting that?
Yeah, so 2 places. The very first place is I have a private podcast that you can go to podcastholly.com. And I actually it's a deep dive into the Rocky framework. It's 5 episodes, a bonus episode, and then you get a PDF companion download as well. So you can go to podcastholly.com and get the entire private podcast for free. You can listen to it on Apple and I think some other feeds. And that's a really fun way to dive deeper into this framework. So if you've enjoyed this interview and want to take it one step further, that's the best place. And then really the other place is Instagram. And that's where I have fun and I play and I hang out. And that's holly.bertone, holly.bertone on Instagram. And come say hi, hit me up on the DMs, let me know that you heard me on the show here. And I answer all of my messages.
I love it. And once again, I want to thank Samantha Carr. Thank you for putting us together. I want to give a big shout out. But something that I promised, we promised that we were going to give them something that they can work with. But I also promised them that if they pick up the new book, The Podcast Blueprint, which took me, spent over $60,000 and spend over 11,000 hours learning how to be a top 0.5% podcaster. If you buy the book for $30, it's an autographed copy. I'll send it right to you from my house. You will get $995 worth of value. I'm going to have you come on the show. I'm going to promote your business to 35 different platforms. And I'm also going to do a Facebook ad for your business. So for $30, you get $995 value. So guys, if you're interested, the new book is here. Just write book down below. So Holly, I just want to say thank you. I'm so grateful and I'm humbled that you took this time to hang out with me. And hopefully we can build a generational relationship from this point forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard, for having me on the show. And it's been so great to connect with you. And I look forward to connecting with your listeners too.
I love it. So guys, remember IG and make sure you go to her podcast, holly.com. Make sure you check it out. I'm going there probably tomorrow. I'm going to listen to all the episodes because I love Rocky and I love being a Rocky story. So guys, as you know, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And something that I always end with is that we can either be a victor of our present and our future, or we could be a victim of our past. And if you guys follow this show, you guys are victors. You are not victims. I love you guys. And remember, vertical momentum. The only way to go is up. Holly, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I can't wait to see what you got coming up next.
Thank you.
God bless you guys. Have a great week.